So they take them up to the review board. And there are boards, there are elders, there's masters. They can't tell you what to do, but they're there to advise you. So you go up and look, and they're going to show you your life. They show you everything you have ever done, every word you've ever said, everybody you have ever touched or hurt or anything. And believe me, this is not easy to look at. They're showing it very objectively, but they don't show it just from the viewpoint of you looking at it. They show it from the perspective of everybody you were involved with. You begin to see it from their eyes, from their viewpoint. And believe me, that hurts, because all of a sudden they'll say, I didn't know I hurt them like that. I didn't know what I said affected them that way. Because, we do that. We go through life. We don't pay attention to what we're doing to people. But over there, you see it. And you see exactly what you've done and exactly the way that affected the other people. I think if more people understood this, we'd be kinder to people, knowing it's going to come back on us. Because you don't put yourself in their position. But if you see what you have actually done to that person, then suddenly you say, I've got to repay this. This is what's karma. I can't let this go by. I have to do something to repay what I have done to that person. So then you talk to the other soul. You'll say, well, we didn't do such a good job, did we? Maybe we ought to go back and do it again. This time, you be the husband, I'll be the wife. You be the mother, I'll be the child. Because you can switch roles around any way you want. It doesn't make any difference. It's all a play anyway. It's just a game. It's all a play. I've had people go through the death experience, and when they're up on the other side looking down at it, they'll say, it was just a play. I see all the actors in the wings getting ready to come on and play their parts and put on their costumes. It didn't mean anything. But they said, when I was there, it was so intense. It was so much emotion. And I was in the middle of all of this. But they said, from over here, it's like a blink of an eye. You can look at it from two different things. We get caught up in the illusion. These are the things that are important for people to know about. And it is just a game, just a play.
And as I stood there, I realized that we're all connected. Everything is connected. We're all one. And that was the message. It was a message of oneness and unity. I had an experience of a couple of life reviews while I was standing in that place, connected to everything. And I thought to myself, loneliness is just an illusion. How can we be lonely when we're connected to everything? And it was a beautiful feeling to feel that oneness with everything in the universe. And I saw the nurses. I'm looking down on my atrophied body, and I saw the nurses running in and out of patients' room on my floor. And what was curious about this is that I only saw the nurses that I had made negative assumptions and judgments about, which was an incredible experience. Because, we all want to think that, I'm not a judgmental person and I don't have any of these prejudiced thoughts. But unfortunately, we all do. That's part of our humanity. And I began to see these people that I had made these negative assumptions about, and something fascinating happened. It was like watching multiple television screens at once. So I saw their lives in a regression of events. And it was kind of like their lives were going backwards to who they were now, back to childhood. And it was almost as if every time there was a watershed event in their life, like abuse or a bad personal decision or an accident, something that happened out of their control, circumstances out of their control, it was as if this movie that was moving in high speed backwards to their birth would stop for a millisecond to give me a glimpse of what had happened to that person. And I understood that this was painting a portrait of who this person was now and why they had become who they are. And I thought to myself, how could I possibly judge these people so harshly? And at the same time, on a different screen, I saw my own life, and I saw the things that I was most ashamed of and the mistakes that I had made in my life. And I forgave myself in that moment. And I said, how could I have ever judged you so harshly? Because, when you think about it, we always are so much harder on ourselves than anybody else. And we, as human beings, we only act on the information that we have at the moment. So we make mistakes in our lives, and this whole life is an evolving process, of hopefully evolving towards something better, moving toward that light and that love, that place that we all come from. And after those life reviews, I had this moment of understanding humanity and this divine source of love and light that we all come from, this place that doesn't judge us. And I felt like I never wanted to leave that place.
Once I got through the tunnel, I ended up in this tree. I don't even know where to begin to describe this tree, but I was sitting in this tree and I was greeted by, I call it an ascended master, or an angel, if you will, or an entity or a being that was advanced. Being agnostic at the time, I didn't believe that there were angels. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in Jesus. You live, you die, you work, you get a family, you buy a home, and that's it. There was no interpretation. There was no alertness to religion. I just denied it, if you will. But I just didn't believe in the God that I had been taught. So there I'm sitting on this tree in a stratosphere before me with my life review. It began from the time I was born in a hospital until the time I died. And I watched everything in my life, moments that you forget about, moments that you driving around and you acknowledge someone across in the street, or you see a child at a park, and every moment of my life had been recorded like a matrix. It was like everything was showing simultaneously, of everything, every conversation, every person, every situation, every encounter, every moment that no one thought, or when we go back to those moments, we think no one's watching. Everything recorded. And I remember in high school, my sister was sharing a locker next to me, and it was my birthday. And my sister and I were very close. And all my football buddies were around me. And she was saying, aren't you going to say how much you love me and how much you care for me? And I'm your best friend. And I'm watching this moment, embarrassed because she's doing all this in front of my friends. And I'm watching this as though not in a perspective of judgment and sadness, but awareness. Watching my sister say all these things, and I could hear my thoughts in my head, watching this moment in my life, saying, oh, just go away, my friends are watching. And I didn't say anything, and I walked away. That was the night my sister was killed by a drunk driver. What I learned was those moments when we go through life that we don't share with people, how much we love them, how much we care for them. The moment for me, as I looked down, there was no judgment. She's like, this angel, if you will, see what you did. There wasn't any of that. What was there was in my heart. You could have done better, Peter. My sister and I were left in an orphanage, and when you have a bond with the only family member that you remember, when I lost her, it was tough. And these moments kept occurring where you would see your life, that you look down, again, no judgment, but an observation with kindness and compassion and understanding for yourself of everything that we do, that we think we're not being watched. It's our life. Those moments that we can shine as individuals, every moment of our life are recorded. I didn't murder anyone. I didn't, rob a store. I wasn't vile to people. But what I did see, as I said, were these moments where I could have shined, where I could have helped someone that needed help. I remember driving. I was being interviewed for CBS, and this is my 6th and final interview, and I thought I had it in the bag, and rather cocky. and I'm driving across this bridge, and I have my windows down and music is playing loud, and I pull up some gum and take it off the wrapper and put it in my mouth, and I flick the wrapper and the paper off the bridge, and I watch this wrapper just going down this river, and this wrapper is met by trash. I'm seeing needles, I'm seeing cat litter, I'm seeing all kinds of debris. Trash meeting trash. And I watched this wrapper go down this river into a lake, and the lake went off into another river, and it went down the river past these oil refineries, and all the toxic waste that were coming out of this factory, this oil refinery, were meeting other waste. And what I saw were children swimming in the river and the lakes. I guess I was forwarded to a moment in my life where I could see these children that had died due to toxic waste, and the doctors having no idea what happened, yet the oil companies and the oil refineries, they did. I saw the pharmaceutical companies turning their faces in another direction. It made me realize that my one wrapper affects everyone. And so it made me, when I came back, more environmentally aware. To this day, I try to do things that basically are more positive to the environment. And again, I say this because my life review was about everything and nothing. How each moment that we live on this life is a moment of value, and we kind of forget that.
As I looked at this map, one of the things that occurred for me was I experienced each of the events again. And as there's no time, again, it was so fast, it was as if seconds were just passing, and I was born again, and I was 3 again, and I was 7 again, and I was experiencing all these things. And yes, some of the experience was me doing things that would I label unkind or mean, and yet in this vision of my experiences, there was no punishment or bad girl, you shouldn't have done that, or this is wrong, or it shouldn't have been that way, and you're here to face your demons or your sins. None of that was happening, because there is none of that. There's nothing we can do here that is wrong. This is all mapped, this is all planned, this is all determined in advance. And so how can you penalize someone for something that you agree to from a soul perspective? This review was for no one but myself, for me to recognize that I'm perfect, I'm whole, I'm complete, I'm this amazing, eternal being, just as you are, and that there's nothing I can do here that is wrong, even the act of killing myself. So, as my awareness crept in that there was nothing that I could do wrong, and there was no sin, or that I wasn't here for any penalty or a life review to mend my ways, or go into a place of purgatory or anything like that. And just know, in all of this, there was never any thinking going on. That's what's so hard to wrap the mind around, that the thinkingness goes away. So there was no conceptual thought like, where am I going from here? Or, ooh, is this a life review? Does that mean I'm going to some hell? None of that was happening. There was just this allowing and being and awareness going on. It's the only way I can explain it.
I felt like I was sitting on a ledge, okay? And I'm not alone. I can't tell you how many people I'm with, but it felt crowded, okay? And it felt crowded. And now I think back, and when you're a hospice nurse, I helped a lot of people cross over, probably thousands. And I think a lot of those people were there supporting me. But there were two energies next to me, and they were the ones that were talking to me. And I'm sitting here and I'm feeling wonderful, and I knew the surgery was happening, but I really didn't care about it. I could, in this some distance view here, I knew there was a lot of activity going on, and at one point I even said, wow, what's going on down there? Because it was like furious for several moments. But I'm talking to these people, these beings, and I'm saying, I don't want to go back. And they never judgment, never, you know, they were like, well, they asked me basically why didn't I want to go back, and I was telling my story, why I didn't want to go back. And I said, I can't go back, I don't have enough energy, it's too hard, you know, yada yada, all the human things you say, you know. And I remember just feeling very loved and supported and great compassion. And I can't say that I had a whole life review, but I had some very significant events in my life come before me. My past marriages, some of them were things, well, I would say most of them that they were showing me were things that I had wished I had done differently, you know? At least the first round of viewings I got. And they said to me very clearly that this is your choice, Eileen. It didn't have to be this hard. And I was like, wow, that's just like, because that's how I operated. You know, I was this do it all by myself, and the theme of my conversations with these beings was very much around the fact that it's always about a choice. If it's not working, choose different. You don't ever have to be afraid, and ask for help and support. For me, that was huge because I don't do that well. And they even said, ask us for help and support. You don't even ask us. That's the, you know, and they weren't saying it in a judgmental way, but it was a very loving way about ask for help and support. We're here. The choice can always be different.
So they're looking me over, and I'm getting less and less coherent while they're trying to do this. And suddenly, right in the middle of all of that, from their perspective, I just stopped. Everything. Heart, respiration, boom, there's nothing there. And they don't know why. You know. Now, what I saw was I immediately started going through this tunnel. And it was kind of like these sort of flashing lights, and I was spinning, but it didn't make me dizzy or anything. And I just remember going down this chute, or up this chute, directions are meaningless there, and I came out in this gray area, like big gray amorphous clouds or something. And I knew there was other beings there. I could sense that. I didn't pay much attention to them, and they didn't pay much attention to me. But one being did. It came up, and I always referred to this being as the greeter because he greeted me. And that's not seems like a very spiritual term, but that's just the way it came across. And I had a conversation with this being. I did go through a series of, it was like snapshots. It was a life review. But there was no good or bad connected to it. It was just more a matter of, this is what you did, and then you did this, and then you did this, and then you did this. But somewhere in there was this undercurrent of the things you haven't done in this life. And the major thing that happened after the life review is we started talking, and while this is going on, I'm going around a series of light bends. I don't know how else to describe it. Just slowly moving around. And it was really nice. I mean, I'm feeling great. Everything's terrific. And I knew if I went around the light bends much further, I'd just keep going to wherever that was.
And then in front of me, and then to the right, was tall grass that came up probably just about my waist high. And I was just standing there. And the next thing I knew, the person that had escorted me there was not there anymore, and I was by myself. But it was so peaceful. Everything was, it was really, what I remember so vividly was I could see a long ways to my left. I could see a long ways to my right. I wasn't allowed to look back. But in front of me was At the time, it seemed like a cloud. It was just a white cloud. And all of a sudden in my mind, I started watching a video of my life. And I saw it from the day that I was born until I was 28 years old. Everything that I'd done in my life, good, bad, it didn't matter, because what mattered was, that's what I was being judged on, was what I had done. And I remember some of it hurt, but some of it made me feel good. But it was what it was. I had no one there to argue with, no one to say, I didn't do that. No, I did it. But there was a lot of things at that time in my life that I wasn't really as on track on my life as I should have been. It was, at that time in my life, I was working for the government, for the Postal Service at the time, and it was all about getting ahead, making enough money. And I was working, I remember at the time I was working in Jackpot, Nevada, which is way out in the middle of nowhere. And knowing that everything that I was doing was for myself and not for my family. And I think probably out of all of that I watched, it was, some was good, some was bad, but I knew that I had to do better with my life. I remember all of a sudden just being so peaceful. After it was all over, it was real. Nothing, there's no fake stuff. There was no, you didn't do this or I didn't do that. I did it. It was all about me. And what was so vivid was it was in my mind. I wasn't talking to anybody. I wasn't negotiating. It was all in my mind that I was visualizing. And when I got through, I went, it's over, I knew that I was dead, and I knew I was moving on.
And I was immediately taken up into a wondrous, loving presence of light and sound. Indescribably wondrous, indescribably loving, beautiful, serene. It was just washing through my being. It was like being a drop of seawater in the ocean, being part of the ocean, but not being the ocean. Simultaneously, all kinds of things were happening. I had a complete life review of my past, the present, and the future. And I was being flooded through by this light and sound of all kinds of spiritual principles, saw the purpose and the function of every religion on the planet, saw the purpose and function, the orderliness of war and peace, and all of the negativity that we have has a purpose. And I knew that what was true of me was true of every other individual also, that each of us is just indispensable to the Creator. Each of us is like an atom in the body of God.
Up we just go. Out, gone. And we're moving towards a world of light, and I began to have thoughts of tremendous shame that I've been so bad. I thought of myself as dirt, garbage, filth. And I thought to myself, he's made a mistake. I don't belong here. He doesn't want me. It's like the shame. Like, how could he care about me? Why me? I'm bad. And we stopped. We weren't in hell, we weren't in heaven. We were in between. And we stopped, and he said, we don't make mistakes. You belong here. And we began to converse, and he was talking and telling me things, and he brought over some angels, and we went over my life from beginning to end. And what they wanted to show me in my life was what I had done right and what I had done wrong. And without going through my whole life story, it was real simple, real simple. When I had been a loving, kind person, considerate of other people, it made the angels happy, it made Jesus happy, and they let me know that it made God happy. And when I had been selfish and manipulative, it made the angels unhappy, it made Jesus unhappy, and they let me know that it made God unhappy. What they were trying to convey to me, in a nutshell, was my whole purpose of my existence had been to love God, love my neighbor as myself. That's why I had been created. That's what I was in this world to do and to learn, and I had failed.
After seeing him, and my impression is it was a him, because it wasn't a man really sitting there, it was a soul who was there. And my impression was that this soul was a male soul. I turned my attention to where I was really supposed to be going, which was to my board. So my board was made up of 3 souls. One soul felt really tall and was very, the word I'm looking for, he was a very experienced soul. And then 2 souls, one on each side of the middle soul, who were talking to me about my life here on earth. And I get the sense that I was like slamming my hand on the table. It was a very business meeting, and it was talking about me coming back. And at that point, I was feeling like I didn't want to come back. And so they were showing me things that I had done in life and things that were still left for me to do. And one of the biggest things for me to do was to be here for my daughter, who at the time was only 4. So after having this conversation with my board that takes place in your brain, because you don't sit and talk back and forth with them, I was then slammed back in my body. Trying to describe what it's like on the other side here is very difficult, because there aren't a lot of words that we humans use for what happens over there. But I can tell you that my brain probably picked things up and tried to say, what is the closest thing I know to what is happening? What am I seeing? So I can tell you that I feel like I saw this really, really pretty table. It was like a board, it was like made out of wood, and it was very, I've never really described it. It was very pretty. The woods in it were different colors. There were light woods, there were like cherry woods, but it was all made out of wood. And I stood on one side, and they stood on the other side. And the one in the middle was, my sense was very old and very wise. And the 2 that stood on each side were younger and in training. So they didn't do a lot of talking to me, but they agreed with what was being said to me.
As if I was walking down a hall, a long, 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 long hall. And at the end of the hall was a masculine entity, very, very spiritual, but it, again, I cannot see. Everything's black, everything's dark, except for the light. But the light that she introduced me to was a larger light than she was. And this light resonated and it vibrated, and it was like a strobe. And it communicated, and I knew who it was in my system, without a doubt. In the system, this entity is like a judge. And it's not an external judgment, it's an internal thing, because we judge ourselves. So it's in essence, the essence was a part of me. And in retrospect, at that time I didn't know that. Okay. So he said, well, do you want to stay? I said, yes, of course. I want to stay, of course. And he said, well, let me show you something. And I perceived another entity, another angel, if you can call it. And this particular entity, angel, is a scribe. And is as if there's an essence, a spiritual essence about us that records everything we do. As if this being has a camera, has a microphone, and is connected to all of our senses, all 5 senses and beyond. Our brains, our central nervous system, everything. This entity knew everything about me from the time I was born until the time I was, my present age at the time I was 33. He knew everything, all the good, all the bad. I could not hide. He cannot lie. He cannot do anything. This entity lives, I know, in the heart. It's an incorruptible entity. And he was assisting the light. And he said, are you sure you want to stay? I said, yes. So I saw myself at 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And I was in the neighborhood. I grew up in Washington, D.C. And you know how the little neighborhood kids are. We go around the neighborhood, we do this, we do that. So it was my brothers and sisters and my neighborhood friend, his name was Heidi. His name was Heidi. And Heidi was maybe about a year younger than us. And there was a beehive in the corner. We lived in apartment buildings at the time. And there was, on the bottom floor of the apartment building, there was a windowsill and there was a beehive. And I said, hey, Heidi, pick up that stick and whack that beehive. And we're gonna run. All of us, we're gonna run and see if we can beat the bees, right? So Heidi, listening to me, I don't know why, he picked up the stick and whacked the beehive, and we all took off and ran. In the apartment buildings, we had a real dark green door. And everyone got into the apartment buildings, and the last one to get in, to approach the door was Heidi. And I had a devious thought in my mind. I said, I'm gonna hold the door and not let Heidi in to see what happens to Heidi. And all those bees from that beehive, they stung the daylights out of Heidi. And every single bee sting I felt every sting, the burning sensations, the swelling. His mother came out the apartment building, scared, frightened. I felt all of her fear, all of her fright, all of her rage. His father came out there trying to figure out what, I felt it all. It rippled. I felt every single thing. All the beehives, all the bees, how angry they were for being stung. I felt it all. Every aspect, everything I felt. And I knew that I had done something wrong. And then he said, well, in heaven, in this place that we call heaven, we have to be perfect. Are you sure you want to stay? And I felt the energy of the rage and the stings and the sins that I'd done against Heidi. And I said, I'm so sorry. And my heart just opened up and I felt it all. His mother, I asked her forgiveness. The father, I asked, of course, Heidi and the bee stings. And then I turned to the light and I said, well, I have not done anything really, really bad, in this life. I haven't killed anyone. I haven't raped anyone. I haven't stolen. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. I went, the litany of things. I haven't done anything really, really bad, not to stay, And the light, when it talked, it would vibrate, and the strobe would go in and out. And at that time, I knew for a fact because I'd asked on the way. I'm digressing. On the way up, on one of the trips, I wanted to know what I was, what I looked like. And I looked down at myself from, I don't know how, and I realized that what I was a ball of light. That's all I was, just a ball of light that kind of waved and as the larger light, as he talked to me, he would strobe, and I would in resonant. So it was a light it was like a symphony. You know, it's very much in sync. So he said, well, you know, are you sure you want to stay? I said, yes, please. I still want to stay. I still want to stay. I still want to stay. So he said, okay. This is what we'll do. And he says, look straight ahead. And I look straight ahead. And it's almost as if you're looking at two mirrors. And the mirrors are reflecting into each other. And there was an infinite number of reflections. They were reflecting back and back and back. And I could see it far back, all the way back. And he said, focus on the first. And I focused on the first image. And the first image, I went into this world. And in this world, it was somewhere in the 1950s, I would think. And I was in war. I think maybe in the Korean War. And I was looking through the sight of a gun. And I saw a Korean soldier. And I said to myself, in my mind, my ego said, that's the enemy. And I pulled the trigger. When I pulled the trigger, I could see out the M1, the bullet came out the muzzle of the gun, and it shot the guy. And he fell. He was in the process of looking through his wallet at his wife and his baby. And I felt the pain, the full impact of the pain. And I felt the sting of the bullet. I felt the blood gushing. I felt his wife. I felt his baby. I felt everything that was connected and affected. The energy of that act, of that dastardly act, I felt the full impact. And I felt, not only did I feel the impact of that, but also felt the impact of everything in that particular life. So what I think I experienced was a life before this life. I was born in 1954. Now I think this was probably maybe 1951, 52, somewhere around there. And I said to myself, you know, after all that, how can that be? So I came, looked at that, and he said, do you want to see more? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't handle it anymore. Because the energy of the guilt and of the sin, of what we call now karma, is such that it's bad enough to experience the karma of this life, then to see another life. Now we're looking at two lives full of karma. The mind does not handle that. The mind is only designed, it only has a capacity to absorb, I think, karma from one life at a time. He was going to show me an access from one life to another life to another life. Every mirror, every image was a life, a life, a life, a life. I could have seen a whole string, a whole, what we call now, what I know now, a whole superposition of images of lives. I had access. And I would have had to absorb all the good and all the bad from each one of those other lives. And I said, I understand now what I must do. So then I realized that what we call sin or negativity can be compared to gravity. So when we do something bad or something wrong, we acquire gravity. So in this state of heaven, everything moved. Within that light, everything ascended, everything moved. Nothing was static, nothing was stationary. Everything moved. And here it is, when I landed in this heavenly plane, I realized when I first got there is if, again, I'm blind, I don't see, I feel. Everything, again, is with the exception of the lights. Everything is pure darkness. But within that darkness is infinite love and infinite ecstasy. So we're going back. And infinite understanding. But I also knew within that light, within that plane, everything was ascending. And for me to stay in that heavenly plane, I would have to shed the guilt. I would have to shed the negativity. I would have to shed the sins that I acquired in this life and those other lives. So it was a purification process to be able to keep ascending in this light of these high beings. So when I realized that, I realized it was not my time to go.
Okay, so before I start, I just got to say that this kind of stuff is like impossible to talk about. Who we truly are is beyond form. You know, we are non-physical being. We are consciousness itself, non-physical, and within the non-physical arises the world of form, arises things, objects, experiences, and words. And words then can't speak to that higher nature because they are form themselves. They're symbols. There's no words I can just say that could possibly even remotely touch the other side or these experiences. I just have to make that really big disclaimer to start. Okay, so that being said, I remember a very long time ago, and again, these experiences all, okay, so they have a sequence. These experiences have a sequence, but they also are kind of happening all at once. Even now, I feel like these memories are happening now. They're not so much in the, I mean, they are in the past, and yet they're simultaneously now. I don't know how to describe that, but so my earliest memory is before I had ever been physical, coming across a being who had been physical, a very powerful, beautiful being. And I was completely overwhelmed by the quality of his nature, by who he was. He was just so beautiful and full of joy and power, so much potential and amazingness. And I was amazed by the quality of his nature, his essence. And I asked him, and again, this is telepathic because there's, it's on the other side. Oh my goodness, how did you do this? Like, look at what you are. And he shared with me that he had been physical, and he shared with me specifically one life that he had suffered with a very difficult physical ailment. I don't know what it was, but some kind of pain or long-term suffering. And the way that he met that experience was incredibly powerful. And he expanded in an incredible way because of this experience. And I asked him, were you healed all the way? Like, because I saw how like damaged he had been. And he shared with me like, yes. And I kind of sensed like the depth of like this, this damage of being physical that he'd experienced and how he had healed all of it. And this amazing expansion that had taken place within him. And I said, I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm going to do that. And I was so like, I was fired up. I was like totally like committed. And he didn't like quite brush me off, but it was a little bit of like, yeah, that's what they all say. And I was like, no, I'm serious. I want to do that. I'm going to do that. I want to go do that. I want to have that experience. I want to be physical. And he said, well, go talk to your guides. So I did. And that was a long time ago, because since then I had many physical lives. And I went back and found him later and but had a converse with him and kind of shared with him, okay, see, I'm on the path. I said I was going to do this, and here I'm doing this. Okay, so now I'm going to jump a bit, because there's a lot, but okay, so now I'm going to jump to a bit that's somewhat immediately preceding this life, where I had taken a long break. Okay, I had lived many experiences, and I took a long break. I would just decided I was done for a while. I was just not doing a physical thing for a while. I was taking a long break, and I remember this guide coming to me repeatedly over and over, like, "Are you ready to go back yet? Are you ready to go back yet?" Basically, like reminding me of my own intention and just trying to kind of nudge me back onto the path. And I put him off for a while, and eventually I said, okay, I'm ready to go back. And I remember reviewing with him the state of who I was, like what I had done, what I had been, and like all these, this is really hard to describe. All this stuff's like impossible to describe, but the qualities of what I had been and who I was. And the thing that I needed to work on was obvious. The thing that, and I hate to put it that way, it's not really work on, but I could tell that I had like, it was just very obvious. Like if you look at like I don't know, like a report or something, like the one thing like I really needed to work on it was like glaring. I was like, oh yeah, I really need to do that. And it involved a fear that I had experienced in one specific life, that in that life, the fear was so profound and so powerful that it drove me to be a very nasty person. I was a very non-helpful person. I damaged many other people. I mean, I say damage, the soul can't truly be damaged. We can't be damaged. But in the life, I had caused a lot of damage because of this fear, and I ended up dying in a very painful, agonizing way. And so I was surprised at how incredibly deep that fear had been for me, how deep that fear that was in me. And so I wanted to re-engage that fear. And as I reviewed this, I knew oh my gosh, the incredible amount of expansion that would be possible if I could do this, if I could meet this fear and integrate this certain energy to this degree, I just knew it would be unspeakably beautiful and powerful if I could do that. But it was so, but even then I could see the vibrational distance was so extreme that I remember asking the guy, is it even possible? Like, has any other being in creation ever done this? Has any other being ever done something this extreme in this kind of way? And he said yes. And there's like this encouraging, like, and you have all time to do so. Like, there's no hurry. So I knew, and this sounds kind of, as a human, this sounds kind of alien to me, but at the time, I just knew with complete confidence, if it can be done, I will do it. If it can be done, I will do it. I knew that I had that ability. So with that being said, they brought me a life that was really perfect for this intention of mine. And so I reviewed this life, and it was perfect. It was like almost as good as they get. And I accepted the life, and I accepted the veil. Okay, so the veil of forgetfulness, this process of incarnating, is what I remember the most out of all of this. And that process is very abrupt and shocking. So in this life, I accepted the veil came over me, and then I was in the womb. But, okay, so when the veil came over me, I felt my knowing be cut off. I felt my vibration plummet from great heights down to the lower and lower, and go lower still, and then lower still more, and keep going lower and lower. And then you finally get there. And when you're there, it's so low, it's ridiculous, and you're cut off. I mean, at least for me, I felt cut off, and I felt like I didn't have that connectedness with other people anymore, other beings anymore. I didn't have my knowing anymore, and it was terrifying. And I wasn't even born yet. I was just in the womb, and I was terrified. And I was only there for a very, very short time. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing this. This is not happening. I mean, this is so ridiculous. This is so low vibration. This is so dark. I am not doing this. And I summoned my might, and I smote the veil. I fought my way out. And I succeeded in doing that. And so I was on the other side again, but I had killed the fetus. I had killed the body that was to be mine. Thinking about it now, I feel responsible for that. I feel sadness, because when I got to the other side, I had a life review. Even for that very short life, I had a life review, and I remember seeing the mother and all the hundreds of other people that would be negatively impacted. Well, I could feel how I negatively impacted the mother. I heaped more difficulty on her through the sorrow of her loss. And also hundreds of other people then that their lives would be made more difficult because I had made the mother's life more difficult. And I couldn't believe. I was like, it's really hard to describe, but I went in with great intentions. Like, I had all these good intentions. I had this big plan, and then and then my fear was so great that right at the beginning, I caused that. And not only did I not succeed in my intention, but I caused the game to be more difficult for the players that I so loved and respected. That was how I'm using metaphors now. It's not quite like that, but so I was disappointed. I knew everything was okay. Everything is on the other side. Everything is well. It's okay. But I was disappointed that I had let that happen. Basically, it had to do with my willingness to feel the fear and my willingness to allow and not resist. So after doing that, they brought me this life. And this life was not as optimal as the first one would have been. It was still good. It was quite good. But each life is only so good because the soul, the spirit, is rather complex in what makes it up. And in my case, I just knew I had many qualities, and there's a certain type of my nature, and that nature has to interface with the life somehow, and then that has to work within the context of what you're trying to do, what you want to do. And this life was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. It was good. So I remember reviewing this life in great detail, and reviewing what I can only describe as a vast flow chart, or like a tree of all the things that might or could or would happen in this life. And it started if you imagine a tree tipped on its side, like thicker trunk and then like it went out to branches, and there's all these, some paths were very likely, some paths were a lot less likely. But it wasn't about events. Well, there were definitely events in it, but it wasn't so much about events as how it would feel, how it would be to be that. Like, how will it be to be that person in these different possible avenues of how this life might unfold? And I went through millions of possibilities all within the blink of an eye. It was easy to do that. I remember reviewing just tons of huge amounts of information all at once. And I knew even then that it was very likely that I would experience a trauma in my 20s that would crush me, and that would help facilitate my opportunity to re-experience this fear that I wanted to re-experience and integrate. So I was super excited to do this, to accept this, even though I knew it would be hard. I knew that this body had certain limitations that other bodies do not, and that this body would be difficult in certain ways on a day-to-day level that would like challenge my ego or something. It would make it difficult for me in a way that I would be forced to turn inward, and I would have to find strength. And also I wouldn't be, because it's hard to explain, but I had a sense that it would be challenging enough to the ego that I would have to, I wouldn't be able to go totally down the ego path because it would be too challenging. So anyway, I reviewed all this, and I remember there having to be a moment to accept, and I don't remember that moment, but I do remember after that waiting for this to start the life. And I remember being in this state where I was still timeless, and it was wonderful. And